She was not supposed to be breathing when the Marine found her, but the white K9 opened one pale eye as if she had been waiting for exactly him. Before dawn, the checkpoint at Red Mesa looked less like a military post and more like something the desert had decided to keep for itself. It sat 27 miles from the nearest paved road, a small square of concrete, wire fencing, faded warning signs, and one yellow security light flickering above a rusted gate. The wind moved through the place in thin, cold ribbons, dragging red dust across the ground and pressing it into every crack, every tire track, every forgotten boot print left behind by men who had long since rotated home. Somewhere beyond the fence, coyotes called from the dark hills, their voices rising and falling like questions no one wanted answered. The storm had passed during the night, but it had left the air raw and bitter, carrying the smell of wet sand, diesel, and hot metal cooling under a sky that had not yet turned blue. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks saw the shape just as his Humvee rolled past the outer barricade. At first, he thought it was a torn tarp blown against the gate, white against the red earth, curled close to the ground. Then the headlights swept over it, and he saw fur. He eased his foot off the gas. The engine grumbled low. His gloved hand tightened on the wheel. For a moment, he did not move. Marines are trained to read a scene before stepping into it. A quiet checkpoint at dawn could mean nothing. It could mean trouble. It could mean a dozen ordinary explanations waiting to become something else. Isaiah looked through the windshield, eyes narrowing beneath the brim of his cover, his breath slow, controlled, visible in the cold cab. The white shape did not move. It lay beside the gatepost, half in shadow, half beneath the weak cone of yellow light. One front paw was stretched toward the road, as if the animal had crawled until the strength ran out. Around its neck, something small caught the headlight beam and flashed once. A tag. Isaiah shifted into park. The radio hissed softly from the dashboard, then fell back into static. Red Mesa checkpoint, he muttered into the mic. This is Staff Sergeant Brooks. I have a possible K9 down at the east gate. Approaching to assess. No answer came. Only the dry crackle of distance and weather. Isaiah waited 3 seconds, then opened the door. The cold hit him first. It slid under his collar and across the back of his neck, sharp enough to wake up every old ache in his shoulders. He stepped down onto the gravel, boots crunching, and stood beside the Humvee with one hand near his radio and the other lowered, open, harmless. The dog was a German Shepherd. Female, he guessed. Large but thin from the angle of the ribs beneath the dirty white coat. Her fur should have been beautiful, the kind that shone silver in sunlight, but now it was dulled by dust and clumped from a long night outside. Her ears lay unevenly, one folded back, the other barely lifted. Her chest moved so faintly that Isaiah had to stop breathing just to see it. He took one step closer, then another. Easy girl, he said. His voice came out low, not command, not pity, something in between. The dog did not bark. She did not bare her teeth, but her eye opened wider, cloudy with exhaustion, fixed on him with a concentration that made him stop 10 feet away. Isaiah had known dogs like that. Not pets, not strays. Working dogs. Dogs who measured the world through scent, posture, heartbeat, intention. Dogs who understood fear without needing it explained. The tag at her neck turned again in the wind. He crouched slowly, letting the light fall across it. For letters were scratched into the metal beneath a worn K9 mark. Halo. Isaiah felt something shift behind his ribs. He had not said that kind of name out loud in almost 2 years. Not since another dog, darker, older, loyal to the last breath, had disappeared into smoke and noise overseas and left Isaiah carrying a silence he could not report, medicate, or pray away. He swallowed, forcing the memory down before it rose too high. Halo, he whispered. The dog's ear twitched. It was small, almost nothing, but in the emptiness of that checkpoint, it sounded louder than a shout. Isaiah took off one glove and reached toward the canteen clipped to his vest. He poured a little water into his palm and extended it. Halo's nose moved once, barely. She smelled the water, then him. Her breathing hitched, thin and dry, but she did not drink. Instead, her gaze slid past his shoulder toward the old guard shack inside the fence. Isaiah followed her eyes. The shack was dark, sealed with a chain that hung loose from the latch. Its windows were filmed with dust. A torn strip of plastic tapped against the frame in the wind. Tap, 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 like a finger asking to be let in. Isaiah looked back at Halo. She had lifted her head half an inch off the ground. The effort made her tremble. Her paw scraped weakly against the dirt, not toward the water, not toward the Humvee, but toward the gate, toward the shack. A warning moved through Isaiah, quiet and cold. This dog had not crawled here to die. She had crawled here to be found. He stood slowly, eyes moving over the fence line, the empty road, the broken lock, the dust-packed ground where faint tracks crossed and vanished beneath the storm's red veil. "What are you trying to show me?" he asked. Halo gave no answer. She only stared toward the darkness behind the gate, her body failing, her purpose somehow still awake. And as the first thin line of sunrise touched the far ridge, Isaiah Brooks understood that saving the white K9 was not the mission. It was only the beginning. Isaiah kept his eyes on the guard shack, but his hand stayed close to Halo, open and steady, because something about the way she looked at that dark little building felt less like fear and more like duty. The gate between them and the shack was half closed, its chain hanging loose, scraping softly against the post whenever the wind leaned hard enough. Red dust whispered over the concrete, filling the spaces between old tire marks and scattering across the white fur along Halo's back. Isaiah should have called it in again. He should have waited for backup. That was procedure, and procedure had kept many good Marines alive. But the radio gave him nothing but static, and the dog at his feet was running out of time in front of him. He lowered himself beside her again and reached for the emergency blanket folded inside his pack. The silver sheet snapped in the wind as he opened it, bright and fragile under the checkpoint light. Halo watched every movement. Her eyes were tired, but not empty. Isaiah had seen that look before in Marines who refused to stretch her until everyone else was loaded first. He had seen it in men who could barely stand, still pointing toward the last person who needed help. He had seen it in his old K9, Moses, the night everything changed. Moses had been a black and tan shepherd with one torn ear and a habit of leaning against Isaiah's leg whenever the world grew too loud. In Afghanistan, that dog had known danger before the instruments did. He had known sadness before Isaiah named it. And when Isaiah came home without him, the silence followed like a second shadow. People thanked Isaiah for his service. They shook his hand in grocery stores, at gas stations, outside church on Sunday mornings. They meant well. But no one knew what to do with a man who still reached down beside his bunk at night, expecting warm fur and finding only cold air. Isaiah wrapped the blanket around Halo's shoulders, careful not to crowd her. "I am here," he said softly. "You hear me, girl? I am here now." Halo's nose moved against his wrist. She smelled the leather of his glove, the metal of his watch, the faint trace of coffee from the travel mug he had finished an hour before. Then she pushed weakly against his hand, not toward comfort, but toward the gate. Isaiah looked at the shack again. Its door was shut, but not flush. A narrow black line showed between the door and the frame. Something inside shifted in the wind, or maybe beneath it. A soft tap, then stillness. Isaiah stood and moved to the Humvee. He opened the rear door, pulled out a first aid kit, a flashlight, and a bottle of water. He also took a protein bar from the console, broke it into a small piece, and brought it back, knowing she might refuse. Halo did. She only lifted her head a little, then let it fall. Her body was telling him one thing. Her eyes were telling him another. Isaiah knelt, slid one arm beneath her chest, and tried to lift her. The moment he did, Halo made a low sound in her throat. Not a growl meant to warn him away. A protest. A plea. Her front paws pressed into the dirt, trembling, trying to pull herself forward. The blanket slipped from her shoulder. "Easy," Isaiah whispered. "You are safe." But Halo was not asking for safety. With a strength that should not have been left in her, she dragged one paw toward the gate and scraped at the ground twice. Then she turned her head toward the shack and gave the faintest sound, half breath, half whine. Isaiah froze. The wind moved around them, cold and restless. Dawn had begun to thin the darkness, turning the eastern sky a bruised purple over the low desert ridge. In that light, he saw more details he had missed before. A narrow trail through the dust. Not tire tracks. Not boot prints exactly. Marks left by something heavy being pulled, then covered badly by the storm. Beside the gate, a strip of pale fabric clung to a thorn bush, fluttering like a small surrender flag. Isaiah's jaw tightened. He scanned the road again, then the fence, then the shack. Red Mesa, this is Brooks, he said into the radio, voice controlled but harder now. I have signs of possible shelter activity inside the checkpoint. No clear response on comms. I am moving in. Static answered. He clipped the radio back to his vest and bent close to Halo. I cannot carry you and clear that building at the same time, he said, as if she could understand every word. So you are going to stay with me. No quitting. Halo blinked slowly. It was not agreement. It was endurance. Isaiah lifted the blanket back around her and positioned her behind the concrete post, out of the wind as much as he could. Then he poured water into the cap and set it close to her mouth. This time, she touched it with her tongue once. Only once. But it was enough to feel like a promise. Isaiah rose, flashlight in hand, boots quiet against the dirt. The gate complained when he pushed it open, a long metallic cry that traveled across the empty checkpoint and vanished into the desert. Every step toward the guard shack made the air feel heavier. The smell changed too. Less dust now, more damp concrete, old paper, and something sterile beneath it, like a medical room long abandoned. Behind him, Halo stirred. Isaiah turned. She had lifted her head again, ears uneven, eyes locked on the shack door with heartbreaking focus. Whatever waited inside, she had already spent everything trying to reach it. Isaiah looked at her one last time, then placed his hand on the cold door. The tapping sound came again, softer than before, from somewhere under the floor. Not the wind, not wood settling. Something alive. Isaiah did not open the door right away. He stood with his palm against the cold metal, listening to the fragile tapping beneath the floor, and for one long second the whole desert seemed to hold its breath. The sound came in uneven intervals. 3 soft knocks. A pause. Then one more, weaker than the rest. It was not random. It carried the desperate patience of someone who had learned that noise was costly, that hope had to be spent carefully. Isaiah leaned closer. United States Marine. He called through the door, his voice low but clear. If someone is inside, make a sound. At first, nothing answered except the wind dragging dust across the threshold. Then the tapping came again, faster this time, trembling through the old boards like a heartbeat under the ground. Isaiah felt the back of his neck tighten. He looked once over his shoulder. Halo was still behind the concrete post, wrapped in the silver blanket, her head lifted by will alone. Her pale eyes did not leave the shack. I hear it, Isaiah told her, though his words were almost lost in the wind. I hear it, girl. The door resisted when he pulled. Sand had packed into the bottom seam, and the hinges groaned as though they had not moved in years. Isaiah braced one boot against the concrete step and pulled again. The door opened with a dry scrape, releasing a breath of stale air that smelled of dust, old wires, sun-baked plywood, and something faintly antiseptic, like bandages stored too long in a metal cabinet. His flashlight cut through the dimness. The guard shack was small, no more than 12 feet wide, with a cracked desk against one wall, 2 overturned chairs, a water cooler with an empty blue jug, and a bulletin board curled at the edges from heat. A faded map of the checkpoint zone hung crooked near the window. Everything looked abandoned, but not untouched. On the desk, a paper cup sat near the edge, not yet buried in dust. A child's hair ribbon, pale yellow, was looped around the leg of a chair. Isaiah saw it, and his chest went still. He moved slowly, scanning every corner, careful not to disturb more than he had to. The tapping came again. Not from the walls, not from the desk, from below. Isaiah lowered the flashlight to the floor. The concrete had been covered with thin wooden panels, some warped from moisture, others cracked in straight lines. Near the back corner, behind a stack of empty supply crates, one panel was not flush with the rest. It sat just a little higher, and red dust had been brushed away from the edges by fingers, paws, or both. Isaiah knelt. I am right above you, he said. Stay calm. The tapping stopped. Then, so faint he almost missed it, came a voice. Small, dry, frightened. Please. The word was barely more than air. Isaiah closed his eyes for half a second, not in hesitation, but in control. There were moments when training took over the hands and mercy took over the heart. He set the flashlight between his teeth, pulled a folding pry tool from his kit, and worked it under the edge of the panel. The wood lifted an inch, then stuck. He pushed harder. Nails gave way with a tired pop. Dust rose in a soft cloud, glittering in the beam of light like ash-colored snow. Isaiah lifted the panel aside and found a square opening beneath it, just wide enough for a small body to fit through. Cool air rose from below. He pointed the flashlight down. A little girl stared up at him from the darkness. She looked about 7 years old, maybe 8, with a round face smudged with dust and dark hair tangled around her cheeks. Her blue jacket was too light for the cold, and she held something wrapped in a torn towel against her chest. At first Isaiah thought it was a bundle of clothes. Then it moved. A tiny white puppy lifted its head, blinked against the flashlight, and made a sound so small it seemed to break before it reached the air. Isaiah's voice softened immediately. "Hey there," he said. "My name is Isaiah. I am going to get you out." The girl did not cry. That frightened him more than tears would have. She only looked past him, toward the open door, toward the checkpoint light, toward the dog outside. "Is she okay?" she whispered. Isaiah followed her gaze. Halo had dragged herself closer. Somehow, impossibly, she was now just outside the shack doorway, the silver blanket slipping from her shoulders, her white fur glowing in the first pale light of morning. Her legs shook under her. Her head was low, but her eyes were fixed on the opening in the floor. The puppy stirred in the girl's arms and gave another weak sound. Halo answered with a breath that was almost a whine. The little girl's lips trembled. "She kept the coyotes away," she whispered. "All night. She stayed by the door." Isaiah looked from the child to the dog, and the story began to assemble itself without needing to be told. A remote checkpoint, a storm, a locked shack, a hidden crawl space, a child too small to climb out alone, a mother dog, or guardian, or angel in white fur, refusing to leave the only two souls smaller than herself. Isaiah reached down into the opening. "Can you hand me the puppy first?" he asked gently. The girl hesitated, holding the bundle tighter. "He is cold." "I know," Isaiah said. "I will keep him warm. I promise." A promise meant something at a place like that. Even to a child. Even to a dog. Slowly, the girl lifted the towel. Isaiah took the puppy with both hands, careful, steady, and tucked him inside the front of his field jacket against the heat of his chest. The puppy gave one faint shiver, then settled. Halo watched every movement. Her body swayed. "Your turn," Isaiah said to the girl. He lowered both arms through the opening, braced his knees, and helped her climb. She was light, too light, her hands cold as paper around his wrists. When she reached the floor, she stumbled, and Isaiah caught her before she fell. She looked toward Halo and tried to move, but her legs trembled. "Wait," Isaiah said softly. Slow. But Halo had already taken one step into the shack, then another. Each movement cost her. Her paws slid slightly on the dusty floor. The girl reached out. "Halo," she breathed. At the sound of her name in that small voice, the white canine crossed the last few feet and pressed her nose against the child's hand. Not hard, not dramatic, just enough to count her, just enough to know she was alive. Isaiah stood over them, the puppy warming beneath his jacket, the sunrise growing stronger through the broken window, and he felt something inside him loosen that had been clenched for years. Halo had not refused rescue because she was afraid. She had refused because her mission was not finished. And now, as the girl leaned her forehead against the dog's dusty white muzzle, Isaiah understood with painful clarity that some creatures do not wait for medals, commands, or thanks. They simply stay until everyone else is safe. Isaiah did not let the moment last long, because mercy had to move before the desert changed its mind. The little girl was standing, but barely, her small hand buried in Halo's dusty white fur as if the dog were the only solid thing left in the world. The puppy inside Isaiah's jacket gave a weak tremble against his chest, a fragile little heartbeat beneath layers of canvas and marine green. Outside, dawn had widened across Red Mesa, turning the ridgeline copper and gold, but the beauty came with warning. Wind was gathering again. It moved along the checkpoint fence in restless waves, rattling loose signs, lifting red dust from the ground, and carrying that dry electric smell that came before another desert storm. Isaiah knew they did not have much time. He crouched in front of the girl so she would not have to look up at him. "What is your name?" he asked. She blinked slowly, as if pulling the answer from somewhere far away. "Emily," she whispered. "Emily Parker." Isaiah nodded once, steady, calm. giving her the kind of certainty children needed when the world had become too large. Emily, I am going to take you to my vehicle. It is right outside the gate. You are safe with me. Her eyes went to Halo. She comes too. There was no question in it. No negotiation. Isaiah looked at the white canine. Halo had lowered herself to the floor again after reaching Emily, her front legs stretched forward, her head resting near the child's shoe. Her breathing was shallow and uneven. Each inhale a small battle she fought without complaint. Isaiah had carried wounded Marines, exhausted recruits, stranded civilians after floods in North Carolina, and once an elderly man through rising water outside Jacksonville. But there was something different about lifting a dog who had spent everything she had on someone else. It felt like touching a prayer before it finished. She comes too, Isaiah said. Emily's mouth trembled, but she did not cry. Isaiah wrapped the silver blanket tighter around Halo, then carefully checked her collar. The tag with her name was not the only thing there. Tucked beneath it was a small strip of worn blue fabric tied in a careful knot. A child's bracelet. Emily saw him notice it and touched her own wrist, where a faint pale line showed against the dust. I gave it to her, she said, so she would know she belonged to somebody. Isaiah swallowed. She knew. The words came out rougher than he intended. Halo's eyes shifted toward him, and for the briefest second, Isaiah felt seen in a way that made him uncomfortable, not because it was accusing, but because it was kind. He moved quickly after that. He lifted Emily first, not because she could not walk at all, but because speed mattered now and her legs were shaking. She was lighter than he expected, all cold hands and brave silence. He carried her to the doorway, then set her on the concrete step outside, close enough to see the Humvee, far enough from the wind cutting through the gate. Stay right here, he told her. Keep this around you. He took off his outer field jacket, still warm from his body and from the puppy tucked inside, and placed it around her shoulders while keeping the small dog bundled beneath one arm. Emily clutched the jacket closed with both hands. The puppy made a faint squeak, and her face changed at once, fear softening into purpose. Can I hold him? She asked. In the vehicle, Isaiah said. Let us get there first. He went back for Halo. The K9 tried to rise when he approached. She made it halfway, then her legs folded beneath her. No panic, no noise, just a quiet failure of strength. Isaiah knelt beside her, placing one hand beneath her chest and the other under her hips. You did enough, he whispered. Let me carry this part. Halo resisted for half a second, her head turning toward Emily, toward the puppy, toward the mission she still thought belonged to her alone. Then Emily called softly from the step. It is okay, Halo. He is helping. That was what did it. Halo stopped fighting. Isaiah lifted her. She was heavier than she looked, not from flesh, but from the weight of what she had endured. Her white fur brushed against his vest, leaving dust and fine strands across the dark fabric. Her head rested against his shoulder, and he could feel each weak breath against his neck. It reminded him so suddenly of Moses that his knees almost forgot their job. The last time he had carried his old K9, there had been too much noise, too much confusion, too many voices telling him to move. He had spent 2 years remembering what he could not change. But this morning was quiet except for the wind, and Halo was still breathing. That mattered. Every breath mattered. Isaiah stepped out of the shack with her in his arms. Emily watched with wide eyes, one hand pressed to her mouth, the field jacket hanging nearly to her knees. She looks like snow, Emily whispered. Isaiah looked down at Halo's dust-covered coat. She will again. The walk to the Humvee was less than 80 feet, but it felt longer because the storm was waking. Dust curled low across the ground and snapped at their boots. The checkpoint light flickered once more, then went out as sunrise took over. Isaiah opened the rear door and laid Halo across the back seat on the blanket. Then he helped Emily climb in beside her and placed the puppy gently in the girl's lap, wrapped tight in the towel and jacket. Halo's nose moved at once, searching. The puppy answered with a tiny sound. Emily guided the little bundle close to Halo's face, and the white K9 touched him with her nose, slow and careful, as if counting him back into the world. Isaiah shut the rear door against the wind and climbed into the driver's seat. He turned the key. The Humvee growled awake. The radio crackled, suddenly alive for half a second. Brooks, this is Red Mesa Control. Say again your last transmission. Isaiah grabbed the mic, eyes on the dust beginning to blur the road ahead. Red Mesa Control, I have one child, one critical K9, and one puppy. We are leaving the checkpoint now. Notify medical and veterinary support. We are inbound. Emily's voice came from the back, small and afraid. Is Halo going to be okay? Isaiah looked at the rearview mirror. Halo lay still, eyes half open, the puppy tucked beneath her chin, Emily's hand resting gently on her neck. Isaiah wanted to promise what only God could decide. Instead, he gave the truest thing he had. She is not alone anymore. Then he shifted into drive, and the Humvee rolled out through the gate just as the red dust rose behind them like a curtain closing on the place where Halo had refused to give up. The road stretched ahead, copper and gold under the morning sun, and Isaiah felt the Humvee settle into the rhythm of the desert. Dust lifted from the tires in soft clouds, drifting back over the checkpoint they had left, as if the earth itself wanted to erase the traces of the night. Halo lay across the back seat, her white fur still matted with dust, but warmed beneath the blanket and Isaiah's steady presence. The puppy, now nestled against her chest, yawned and stretched tiny legs that had hardly known comfort. Emily Parker's hands rested lightly on Halo's shoulder, her eyes wide with relief but still cautious, taking in the vehicle, the horizon, and the way safety seemed fragile in the desert morning. Isaiah spoke quietly to her, the tone of a Marine trained to keep calm under pressure, but softened by the presence of those who had survived a shared ordeal. You are doing great, Emily, he said. We are almost at the medical outpost. Everything else comes after we make sure everyone is safe. Emily looked down at the puppy and smiled faintly, her fingers tracing the small back under the towel. Halo shifted slightly, lifting her head to glance at Isaiah, as if confirming that he was still there, still keeping watch, still part of the team that had not abandoned her. The wind outside had changed, warmer now, carrying a dry heat that smelled of sagebrush and the distant hills beyond the mesa. Isaiah adjusted the rearview mirror, watching the dust flare up behind them, and for a moment, the desert felt alive, not empty. Every gust seemed to whisper the memory of the night, but it was muted by the light of dawn and the quiet breathing of those in the back seat. He spoke again, softly, almost to himself, no soul left behind. Halo's paw twitched in acknowledgement, a subtle sign that she understood in her own way, and the puppy made a low murmur of agreement. Emily's small voice broke the silence. She stayed all night, so we would not be alone, she said. Isaiah nodded, feeling the weight of that statement, knowing that Halo had given everything she could, even when it might have cost her life, to ensure that the smallest, most vulnerable, and weakest were protected. He thought of every detail, the tapping under the floor, the way Halo had pushed Emily toward him without hesitation, the small whines that had guided him step by step, and the faint warmth he could feel radiating through her tired body. The Humvee rattled across uneven gravel, and Isaiah focused on each bump, each turn, each movement, balancing the vehicle, the child, and two dogs who had placed their trust in him. He considered the challenges ahead, medical attention for Halo, nourishment for the puppy, water and warmth for Emily, and yet none of that diminished the quiet satisfaction that came from the mission they had just completed. Halo raised her head again, amber eyes locking onto Isaiah for just a moment, and he saw the reflection of resilience in them. The puppy squirmed slightly in her presence, finding comfort not in the blanket alone, but in the proximity of a protector who had been chosen as much by circumstance as by instinct. Isaiah's hands rested lightly on the steering wheel, his knuckles white, but not from tension. It was the weight of responsibility, not fear, and he welcomed it. The desert sun climbed higher, lighting up the distant ridges with a soft glow that reached the windshield, casting shadows across the Humvee's hood, long and lean, as if to measure how far they had come. Halo shifted slightly again, leaning toward the puppy, a protective gesture that made Isaiah's chest tighten in a way that reminded him of his early days in the Corps, when trust was built in inches and moments, not in speeches or orders. Emily's head rested against Halo now, and the soft rhythm of the dog's breathing provided a counterpoint to the engine, a melody that turned exhaustion into calm, terror into relief. Isaiah felt the stillness behind him, the kind that follows a night of survival, the quiet affirmation that even in the middle of the desert, in a place forgotten by maps and memory, loyalty and courage could still carve a path forward. The Humvee crested a small rise, and Isaiah saw the medical outpost ahead. White buildings dusted in early sunlight, the faint hum of generators and activity signaling safety, warmth, and life. He exhaled slowly, letting his shoulders loosen, and for a brief moment, allowed himself to look at the faces behind him. Emily's eyes were open, focused on Halo and the puppy. Halo's head rested slightly higher now, her breathing steadier, a sign of recuperation. The puppy, though still trembling slightly, had found the faint rhythm of safety under Isaiah's jacket. Isaiah tapped the horn softly, a signal to the team at the outpost that they had arrived, that none had been left behind, that the mission was not simply to rescue, but to preserve hope. The wind carried across the mesa one last time, scattering dust and memories alike, and Isaiah allowed a small smile. It was not pride, not relief, not joy, but recognition. Recognition that even in remote, quiet places, loyalty, courage, and compassion had found their mark. Halo lifted her head to glance at Isaiah again, and the puppy yipped softly. Emily whispered something, almost lost in the noise of the engine. "Thank you." Isaiah did not answer. He did not need to. The truth of what had happened, the bond that had been forged in the night, and the quiet miracle they had witnessed was enough for all of them. The Humvee rolled to the gate, dust drifting behind like a trail of ghosts laid to rest. And for the first time since the night began, Isaiah felt a thread of peace, the knowledge that duty and mercy could meet and travel the same path. The medical outpost loomed closer with every mile, a cluster of low white buildings dusted in pale sunlight, their roofs warming under the desert morning. Isaiah kept the Humvee steady, each bump across the gravel sending Halo and the puppy shifting lightly in the back seat, yet neither making a sound beyond small sighs of fatigue. Emily Parker leaned forward, her hands brushing the puppy's fur, her eyes tracing every contour of Halo's exhausted form. The air inside the vehicle was still except for the soft hum of the engine and the intermittent hiss of tires against small stones. Isaiah spoke quietly, not to the girl, not to the dogs, but to the space between them, to keep rhythm and presence steady. "Almost there," he said. Halo's ear twitched slightly at the tone, her amber eyes tracking him, reading the meaning beyond the words. The puppy nuzzled against her, small and fragile, yet perfectly alive because of the endurance of the white K9. Isaiah thought of all the nights he had spent on patrols where the desert offered no comfort and no mercy, where every breath was a calculation, every shadow a potential threat. But this morning, the shadows held a promise. Halo had not moved for hours without purpose. Every twitch of muscle, every lift of a paw had been a message, a guide, a silent instruction on how to navigate this early desert storm. Isaiah glanced in the rearview mirror. Emily's small head rested now against Halo's shoulder, the blanket draped across both of them, warmth shared and measured in tiny, comforting increments. The puppy stirred again, stretching legs stiff from being curled for too long. Isaiah adjusted the blanket around it, careful to leave it close to Halo, letting the mother's presence serve as more than comfort, as protection, as reassurance that they were no longer alone. The Humvee climbed a small rise, revealing the outpost in more detail. Satellite dishes still spinning in the wind, the faint outline of an air-conditioned mobile unit near the far corner, and the flutter of a flag rising slowly with the breeze. Isaiah exhaled slowly. The desert seemed to hold its breath with him. The road leveled, and the outpost doors grew larger in his vision. He eased the vehicle onto the gravel path that led up to the entryway, careful to keep speed moderate, mindful of every jolt that might startle Halo or the puppy. Halo lifted her head briefly, sniffed the air with slow, deliberate breaths, as if confirming that the path ahead would not betray them. Isaiah tapped the horn once softly, announcing their arrival without panic, without alarm, because the moment called for care, not urgency. Emily whispered softly to the puppy, her words lost to the morning wind, yet her tone was enough to ease the tension that had coiled through the back of the Humvee for miles. Isaiah parked near the entrance, engine idling low, and slowly opened the rear door. Halo lowered herself onto the seat, legs trembling but holding, her head lifting only when Isaiah leaned down to offer guidance. He placed a hand gently beneath her chest, another beneath her hindquarters, and she allowed him to lift her to the ground, trusting in his steadiness, the rhythm of his breath, the assurance in his voice. The puppy, wrapped in Emily's small arms beneath the jacket, chirped softly, and Halo responded with a short exhale, a sound like acknowledgement, a promise that she would remain calm, remain alive, remain protective. Isaiah held her close for a moment, letting her legs settle, letting her chest rise and fall with steady, even breaths. Emily stepped closer, her small hands brushing against Halo's fur, her presence quiet and grounding. Isaiah guided the girl toward the administrative building, careful to keep distance from the gravel where loose stones could shift under small feet. The wind had picked up slightly, rustling the metal signage and sweeping a faint cloud of red dust across the parking area, but the humans and dogs inside moved with purpose and caution. Halo followed, her paws making soft impressions in the sand as she stepped with Isaiah, ensuring that Emily and the puppy remained between her and the open desert. Inside, the scent of air conditioning mixed with antiseptic and the faint odor of coffee from the break room. Isaiah placed Halo gently on a padded mat in the corner, letting her lie down while still keeping close enough that she could feel the presence of both him and Emily. The puppy remained in Emily's arms, warming against her small chest, eyes closing briefly as the child hummed a soft, calming tune she had made up in the back of the Humvee. Isaiah knelt by Halo, running a hand slowly along her back, feeling the heat of life return to her muscles, feeling the pulse that had refused to falter through the night. Halo lifted her head once, amber eyes meeting his, a silent bond of understanding, relief, and quiet pride passing between them. Emily's voice broke the silence, soft and careful. "She is so strong," she said. Isaiah nodded. "Stronger than most of us realize," he whispered. Outside, the desert continued to awaken under the rising sun, but inside the medical outpost, there was a stillness that carried the echoes of the night. A journey completed, a bond affirmed, a life saved by courage, determination, and the unwavering spirit of a white K9 who refused to give up. For a little while, the room allowed everyone to believe the worst had passed. The medical outpost was quiet in that strange way safe places become quiet after danger has finally been named. A ceiling vent hummed softly above them, pushing cool air through the small treatment room. The morning sun fell through narrow blinds and striped the floor in gold. Somewhere down the hall, a printer clicked, boots crossed tile, and a telephone rang twice before someone answered in a calm voice. Ordinary sounds. Blessed sounds. Isaiah stood beside the padded mat, one hand resting near Halo's shoulder, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Emily sat in a chair much too large for her, wrapped in Isaiah's field jacket, holding the puppy in her lap like something made of glass. The little dog had stopped trembling. Every few seconds, he pressed his nose into the towel and gave a tiny sigh, and each time he did, Emily looked at Halo as if sharing news only the two of them could understand. "He is warm now," she whispered. Halo's ear moved. Isaiah saw it and almost smiled. Almost. Then the door opened, and Captain Denise Whitaker stepped in with a veterinary medic beside her. Whitaker was in her early 40s, steady-eyed, with her dark hair pinned tight and her sleeves rolled with practical urgency. She had the presence of someone who never wasted motion, someone who had seen fear enter rooms and had learned not to let it take charge. The medic, Lance Corporal Aaron Miles, carried a soft stretcher and a compact medical kit. He took one look at Halo and lowered his voice. "She has been out there a long time." Isaiah did not answer right away. He knew that tone. It was not hopeless, but it had already begun measuring distance. Whitaker crouched near Emily first. "You are Emily Parker?" The girl nodded. "My mom is going to come. She is on her way," Whitaker said gently. "We reached County Dispatch. They found your family." Emily's eyes filled, but she held the puppy tighter and did not let the tears fall. "Halo saved us." Whitaker looked at the white K9, then back at the child. "Then we will do everything we can for her." The medic moved carefully around Halo, checking her breathing, her gums, her temperature, speaking in low, measured words that belonged to people who fought panic by naming facts. Dehydration, exposure, exhaustion, possible infection, severe stress. Isaiah heard each word land, one by one, like pebbles dropped into deep water. Halo stayed still through the exam, her eyes half open, fixed not on the medic, not on the equipment, but on Emily and the puppy. Even there, even in the room built to help her, she was still guarding them. Miles prepared fluids and warm towels. Whitaker radioed for transport to the larger veterinary clinic at Fort Stanton, 34 miles away. Isaiah knelt close, his broad hand gentle against Halo's neck. "You hear that, girl? They are getting you real help." Halo blinked. Once. Slowly. Then her breathing changed. It was so small at first that only Isaiah noticed. A pause where there should have been an inhale. A thin catch beneath her ribs. Then another pause, longer than the first. The puppy lifted his head from Emily's lap and made a soft sound. Emily looked up. "What is wrong?" Miles leaned closer. His calm face tightened. "Captain." Whitaker moved at once. The room shifted. Not loud. Not chaotic. Just suddenly sharper. Towels were moved. A small oxygen mask was brought forward. Isaiah stepped back only because he was told to, but every part of him resisted the distance. Halo's eyes opened wider, cloudy with fatigue, searching. Her head moved an inch, trying to find Emily. "I am here," Emily said, sliding down from the chair before anyone could stop her. "I am here, Halo." Whitaker started to guide her back, but Isaiah raised one hand slightly. "Let her stay close." His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of command and prayer together. Emily knelt near the mat, the puppy bundled against her chest. Halo's gaze found them. For a moment, her body eased. Then her chest stopped moving. The silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything Isaiah had never said. Full of the night at the checkpoint, the tapping beneath the floor, the torn yellow ribbon, the way Halo had refused water because her mission was not finished. Full of Moses, too. Moses in the smoke of memory. Moses gone before Isaiah could say thank you. Moses leaving behind a wound no metal could cover. "No," Isaiah whispered. He did not shout. He did not break. He simply stepped forward and placed his hand against Halo's side, waiting for the breath that did not come. Miles worked with careful urgency. Whitaker's face stayed composed, but her eyes had gone wet. Emily began to shake her head, slow at first, then faster, as if refusing a truth before it could enter the room. "She promised," the girl said. She stayed. She promised. The puppy wriggled suddenly in the towel, small paws pressing against Emily's sleeve. He made a thin, searching cry, turned toward Halo, and reached his tiny nose toward her still muzzle. Isaiah looked down at him, then at Halo, and something inside him moved before thought could stop it. "Let him near her," he said. Miles hesitated. Whitaker nodded once. Emily placed the puppy gently beside Halo's face. The little dog crawled awkwardly, blind with trust, and pressed himself against the white canine's cheek. He licked her muzzle once. Then again. Nothing happened. The room waited. The vent hummed. The sunlight trembled across the floor. Isaiah bowed his head, not caring who saw. "Please," he breathed. It was not a speech. It was barely a word. But it held every mile, every loss, every soul he had failed to carry, and every soul he still hoped could be saved. The puppy gave one more tiny cry. Halo's paw twitched. The room held its breath for a moment, quiet except for the soft hum of the ventilation system and the faint shifting of blankets. Halo's eyes flickered, a thin amber glow against the pale morning light streaming through the blinds. Emily sat cross-legged on the floor beside the mat, the puppy curled in her lap, tiny whimpers marking the rhythm of life reasserting itself. Isaiah knelt at Halo's side, hand resting gently on the white canine's shoulder, feeling the rise and fall of her chest, each movement measured, delicate, miraculous. Outside, the sun climbed higher over the mesa, painting the desert with shades of copper and gold that reflected softly through the window, dust motes dancing in the beams like silent witnesses to the scene. Whitaker checked the monitors, moving with calm authority, her presence steadying the room without a word. Miles prepared a warm towel and gently brushed Halo's coat, removing the dust and debris of the night, while keeping his touch careful, measured. Halo lifted her head slightly, nose twitching, and the puppy stirred, nudging against her muzzle, eliciting a faint exhale from the canine that sounded almost like acknowledgement. Isaiah whispered, "That is it, girl. You are safe now." And Halo's ears twitched, scanning the room and settling her gaze on Emily. The little girl smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face, and murmured, "I knew you would come." Halo responded with a faint whine. a subtle sound that held the weight of the night's journey, the crossing of miles, the survival through cold and dust, and the devotion that had not wavered for a second. Isaiah's chest tightened. This was not just survival. It was the quiet miracle of persistence, loyalty, and faith enacted through the smallest of movements, the faintest of breaths, the silent assertion of presence. The puppy wriggled slightly, seeking warmth and comfort, and Halo nudged him with her nose, settling once more against the edge of the blanket, guarding, steadying, mothering, reassuring. Emily's small hands rested on Halo's back, brushing fur gently, and the white canine leaned into the touch, a connection that spoke of trust regained and purpose fulfilled. Outside, the desert wind shifted, ruffling the flag atop the outpost, scattering a few stray leaves and dust particles along the ground, the light flickering in rhythm with the gentle sway of the building's doors. Isaiah observed, taking in the stillness that followed action, the calm after the storm of movement, decision, and survival. Whitaker leaned close to the monitors again, checking vitals, and Isaiah's gaze returned to Halo, noting every subtle sign of recovery. The small twitch of an ear, the soft blinking, the gentle shift of weight against the mat. Emily whispered to the puppy, "You are okay now," and he let out a faint, rolling sound of comfort, pressing close against Halo's side, forming a chain of life and warmth. The room breathed together in unison, the girl, the puppy, Halo, and Isaiah, each aware of the others, connected by the events of hours before, by the necessity of care, and by the quiet miracle of being together, unharmed, alive, and supported. Halo lifted her head fully for a moment, eyes brightening as she looked from Emily to Isaiah, then to the puppy, assessing, acknowledging, confirming that the mission had been completed. Isaiah's hand moved along her back in a slow, steady stroke, a gesture of assurance, of relief, of unspoken thanks. Outside, the wind carried the scent of sagebrush and desert morning, the distant hum of life beginning again beyond the outpost walls, and within, the room was still, yet full of the energy of survival, trust, and connection. Emily leaned back slightly, taking in the scene, the warmth of the Humvee's heat lingering faintly through the jacket still wrapped around her shoulders, the gentle breathing of the puppy, and Halo's steady presence beside them. Isaiah felt a soft tightening in his chest, a mixture of awe, relief, and gratitude, and he whispered quietly, not to Emily, not to the dogs, but to the moment itself, "We made it." Halo responded with a soft nudge of her nose against the puppy, eyes meeting Isaiah's for a final acknowledgement, the kind that held the night's struggle, the journey, and the quiet, unspoken understanding that they had endured together. The light shifted, highlighting the folds of the blanket, the pale shine of Halo's coat, and the small rise and fall of the puppy's tiny chest. Isaiah rose slowly, glancing once more at Emily, Halo, and the puppy, feeling the completion of one chapter and the promise of the next, the room holding all of them in a soft, steady moment that seemed to stretch indefinitely, carrying with it the quiet miracle of survival, presence, and unwavering loyalty. 3 months later, the desert no longer looked like the place that had almost taken them. Red Mesa had softened under spring light, the hard edges of the checkpoint warmed by late afternoon sun, the old guard shack repaired, the gate repainted, the warning signs replaced with clean metal that flashed softly whenever the wind moved. The road still ran empty for miles in every direction, and the hills still held their silence. But something had changed there. It was no longer just a forgotten post on a remote route. It was a marker, a place where a little girl had been found, where a puppy had taken his first full breath of safety, and where a white canine had spent everything she had left to keep watch until help arrived. Staff Sergeant Isaiah Brooks stood near the gate with his cover tucked beneath one arm, dressed in clean fatigues, his boots planted in the same dirt where he had first seen Halo lying beneath the broken yellow light. The light was fixed now. So was the chain. So was the door of the guard shack. But Isaiah knew some things were not fixed with tools. Some things healed in smaller ways, over long mornings, quiet walks, and the warmth of a living creature leaning against your leg when memory came too close. Halo stood beside him. Her coat was white again, washed clean of dust and shining like snow under the New Mexico sun. She was still thinner than she should have been, and the veterinary clinic at Fort Stanton had sent her home with a schedule, medicine, and more instructions than Isaiah thought any dog would tolerate. Halo tolerated all of it with the patient dignity of a creature who had already survived the worst night of her life and was not impressed by thermometers or bland food. Around her neck was a new collar, deep blue, with the old metal tag polished and secured beside a smaller brass one that read, Halo, retired K9, loved and accounted for. Isaiah had not chosen those words quickly. He had sat at his kitchen table for nearly an hour before writing them down. Loved was easy. Accounted for was harder. It was a Marine word, a promise word, a word that meant somebody had looked, counted, remembered, and refused to forget. A white pickup rolled slowly through the open gate and stopped near the shack. Emily Parker climbed out before her mother had fully shifted into park, her sneakers hitting the dirt in a fast little run. She had grown stronger in 3 months, her cheeks full again, her hair tied back with a yellow ribbon that matched the one once found inside the shack. In her arms, squirming with impossible energy, was the white puppy, now round-bellied, bright-eyed, and carrying himself like he owned every inch of the desert. Grace, wait. Emily laughed, but the puppy wriggled free the moment his paws touched the ground and bounded straight toward Halo. Halo lowered her head, and Grace tumbled into her chest, as if returning to the safest place on earth. Isaiah watched the reunion without speaking. Emily slowed when she reached him, suddenly shy in the way children become when gratitude is too large to hold. Hi, Sergeant Brooks, she said. Hi, Emily. Her mother came behind her, one hand over her heart, eyes already shining. She had thanked Isaiah in the hospital. She had thanked him in letters. She had thanked him through county officers, base staff, and every official channel that could carry a parent's relief. But standing here, in the place itself, words seemed smaller. Isaiah gave her a gentle nod, saving her from having to find them again. The 4 of them walked to the new sign set near the gate. It was simple, dark metal against 2 wooden posts, not grand, not dramatic. Just clean letters catching the sun. No soul gets left behind. Emily read it out loud, then looked down at Halo. That is about her, she said. Isaiah looked at the white K9, now standing with Grace pressed beneath her chin, her amber eyes calm, her body relaxed in the warm wind. It is about all of you, he said. Emily reached into her pocket and pulled out a small blue ribbon, newer than the first one. She held it toward Isaiah. Can she wear this one too? Isaiah crouched so they were eye to eye. I think she would like that. Emily tied the ribbon carefully to Halo's collar, beside the polished tag. Halo stayed still through the whole thing, as if she understood ceremony, as if she knew some promises needed a witness. When Emily stepped back, Halo pressed her nose gently into the girl's palm. No one spoke for a while after that. The wind moved over the mesa, carrying the smell of sagebrush, sun-warmed dirt, and distant rain. Grace chased a dry leaf in clumsy circles while Halo watched him with quiet authority. Emily laughed. Her mother covered her mouth and cried softly, and Isaiah stood in the golden light, feeling something inside him finally loosen. He thought of Moses then, not with the old sharpness, but with a tenderness he had not expected. For the first time in years, the memory did not arrive as a wound. It arrived as a blessing. A dog had once taught him how to survive duty. Another had taught him how to receive mercy. Halo leaned against his leg, warm and steady. Isaiah lowered his hand into her fur, feeling the life there, the breath, the trust, the ordinary miracle of staying. He looked out across the desert road, the same road that had brought him to her when she had almost disappeared beneath dust and dawn. Some stories do not end with applause. Some do not need medals, speeches, or headlines. Some end with a child laughing in the sun, a small dog growing strong, a Marine learning to forgive himself, and a white K9 standing guard over a place that no longer feels abandoned. As the sun dropped behind the ridge, Halo lifted her face into the wind, and Isaiah understood at last that she had not only been waiting to be found. She had been sent to find him too.